Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Director's Exchange. I'm your host, Raymond Aikens, and I have with me in the studio today my esteemed guest and good friend, Mr. Alan Creedy. Perhaps Alan doesn't need any introduction, but for those few of you out there who may not have ever heard of him, I'd like to go through the standard introduction, and we'll get into the meat of the show. Alan is a former certified public accountant. And Alan, at some time, maybe you'll explain why you chose not to keep that particular shingle in your arsenal. Alan also happens to be a graduate with a degree in psychology.
Yeah.
So here you are, you have a CPA and a guy with a degree in psychology, and that's a kind of a unique combination, which you don't see every other day, but I want you to know I'm fairly close to you in terms of that background. But to save time, I want to get right into the meat of today's presentation. So if you'll forgive me, I want to refer to my notes because they're very precise. I tried to use as few run-on sentences and whatever in terms of describing who Alan is. And again, that's for those of you who may have never heard of him, but I doubt if that's the case. But Alan has over 40 years, hands-on experience in the funeral service industry. And because of that, he feels that he was able to develop the ability to quickly analyze what the core problems are with the business. But you can identify core problems, Alan, but as I'm sure you understand, we can have a list of problems, but they must be prioritized.
Absolutely, you're exactly correct.
Yeah, and okay, so that's Alan's specialty. We can identify issues that need to be addressed, but then they must be prioritized and then strategies implemented to turn around a situation.
Correct.
Now, here's where I should have been more, I should have been more extensive at the outset. I've always thought of you as a turnaround specialist.
Early in my career, that's what I did for a job.
Okay. And for those of you who don't know what a turnaround specialist is, I think that's very important. A turnaround specialist, and I might let you define this for me, but I would think of it as a person comes into a situation where you have an entity, a business, that is not performing very well. Matter of fact, it's obvious that some things need correcting, okay? So they call in an expert like yourself, and you come in and you make some very hard decisions. Now, turnaround experts, if you follow what I'm saying, aren't very loved, I would guess.
Well, that depends, Ray.
They loved by management, maybe.
Well, no, it's interesting to work in a turnaround situation.
Okay, go ahead.
Because if it's bad enough, everybody's on board with fixing it.
Yes.
You don't have to push strings uphill. And you might have to, but not often. And so I worked for a company early in my career, after I got my accounting certificate, that bought distressed companies, fixed them up, and resold them.
Yes.
All right. And my job was to go, they would assign me to 1, 2, 3, 4 of these companies, and my job was to go and figure out what was going on and what needs to be done to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the imagination of a lot of people is that the big way to solve problems is to cut staff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people don't like them. But that's not the case. And I don't think your audience necessarily is interested in the intricacies of that.
Sure.
But it comes back to being able to quickly identify what's happened, what needs to happen, who needs to do it, and how quickly each item on the list needs to be accomplished.
Now, if our audience was paying any attention to what you just said, then there are cases in funeral service where those kind of skills come really into play.
Oh yeah.
If you're going to turn around and so.
Well, the fixes in funeral service are they're fairly common, but they're also complicated by the fact that most funeral homes are privately held, family-owned businesses. So they make choices that somebody trained at Harvard Business School would not make.
Absolutely.
All right, but
Yeah.
they make those choices.
Yeah. May favor the kids over other staff, or somebody
or
may get
a
more
long-term
bennies.
employee that was loyal but is now really past their prime. But those are personnel issues. So there are other issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and a large part of that is they're operating out by the seat of their pants. And when in those situations, it's very important for me to really narrow down what they can focus on. I think a lot of people make mistake that they go into those situations, and it doesn't need to be a turnaround, and they think they need to turn this funeral director into an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, that does not work.
I understand that. I hear that a lot.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I try to teach my clients, regardless of the situation, what are the things that they have to manage, and how do they know how to manage them?
Mm-hmm.
So I boiled down. I can tell you, it's a little. I probably develop a tune to it. That you have 2 key drivers, you have 3 primary costs, and you have 1 key result. And if you focus on those items, and I know that sounds trite, so the 2 key drivers are volume and average sale.
Volume and average sale.
All right, and well, I'll get back to that in just a minute. Well, there's a point there. The 3 key costs are your caskets and vaults and urns and the like, and physical merchandise that you sell.
Okay.
Labor, which is all labor, whether it's contract labor or your medical insurance or your payroll taxes or whatever, all combined, and how these relate to your sales, and then facility costs. Those are your primary expenses. Beyond that, yes, there are other expenses you can control, but if you can control those 3, you're a leg up on most of your competitors.
If someone wanted to write that down, can you run those things?
Absolutely. Or
you said there are 5 things?
There are 5 things
that you need to pay attention to.
There are 2 key drivers.
2 key drivers.
Volume and average sale.
Volume and average sale.
Now, a lot of people will want to drill down on average sale and say, I want to know what my average cremation sale is. I want to know what my average cremation with memorial is. I want to know all that. Most people, in fact, I don't know any exceptions to this, and I know a lot of people, that's too much information.
Really?
At most, you want your average cremation sale and average burial sale, but from the overwhelming majority of funeral directors, they would do very well if they knew what their average sale is. So those are the 2 key drivers.
Okay.
All right. Volume and average sale.
Okay.
Then there are 3 costs.
3 costs.
All right.
3 main costs.
All right. And those are cost of sales, which is only physical merchandise for resale.
Right.
Okay. Labor, which is not just salaries. It's your payroll taxes,
benefits,
FUTA, and your benefits, and all that.
Okay.
All rolled into one.
Okay.
And then your cost of facility. Okay. Now, the cost of facility and labor takes some experience, because many funeral directors appropriately will own the real estate outside the business, and they will charge a rent greater than market rent.
Okay.
And so you have to adjust that back.
Yeah, I
but
gotcha.
Those are the 3 costs that they need to control. And there's only one result. Okay? And I bet you're thinking profit, and that's not it. The result is EBITDA. Now, we're not going to get into what all that is.
I know,
much.
Yeah.
But
earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization.
But the reason it's not profit is that these are small, privately held businesses, and profit for tax reasons is manipulated.
Okay.
And EBITDA is a cleaner number.
is a cleaner number. Okay. All right.
I used to tell them to manage their profit, but it doesn't make any sense because they're overcompensating themselves to move profit into that. They're paying themselves a larger than market rent, and so on. So EBITDA is a much cleaner number.
Okay. Beside those 5 things you need to pay attention to, I didn't hear you mention, because in the case of someone who is glad to see a turnaround specialist come into a situation, or they for someone to welcome it, isn't that evidence that there was a toxic culture in place prior to that was also impacting those
No,
metrics
not
that you mentioned?
necessarily. Not necessarily.
So you mean
Yes, there
a
sometimes is.
well-run business? You're saying?
Well, don't equate toxic culture with poorly run business. You can have a toxic culture in a well-run business.
Yes.
Okay.
That's very true.
And by the way,
I
one of the
get
things
that.
you weren't aware of is that I am a accredited corporate culture analyst.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm planning to
All
get to
right.
that.
Well,
But go ahead.
don't go too deep. But
Okay.
at any rate, each turnaround situation is different. Mismanagement in funeral service comes largely because of wanting to be liked and be a nice person, and
You give away
not
the store,
understanding,
or
not understanding what you don't know and what you need to know. And that's why I broke that down into the 5 pieces,
okay.
because those are simple.
Okay.
And those are the biggest levers you've got. There are other levers, but those are the biggest ones you have.
And that's
So,
interesting.
you know, I can accomplish more, significantly more, by helping you. Don't have to increase prices, but helping you increase your average sale by only 1 or 2%. I can accomplish more with that than I can by cutting your advertising budget.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and people just don't understand that. So that's a primary agenda item for me when I work with clients. Is I'm not going to try and make them into an accountant, but I'm going to leave them with some tools that enable them to figure out how to steer their ship.
Mm-hmm.
Really is what it comes to. Now, when you talk about the culture,
Yes.
okay, I have done the analysis and research on that, and there is a universal culture. There are exceptions, but they are rare in funeral service, and it's called passive aggressive.
Okay.
And I know that sounds offensive, and I'm sorry for that, but that's how it works.
Explain, please.
Well, there's a Harvard professor. How did he say it? A passive aggressive culture is one that puts more energy into thwarting things than accomplishing things. Thwarting things than accomplishing things,
Okay.
but in the nicest way.
Hmm.
So what's meant by that is you have a group of people in the culture of all kinds, all levels,
Okay.
and they're very well-meaning. They're really pretty committed to this work.
Mm-hmm.
But because they don't have a focus and they don't have the kind of leadership that would create that focus, they're all running into what they think is the best thing to do, which is often in conflict with each other. So there's all these tensions that built up. So you think of it as a toxic culture. And yes, sometimes if it is toxic, somebody needs to go. But most often you can, especially if they're afraid for their jobs, they're going to come into concert. And frankly, if you can help them understand how, where are we all going with this? Do we believe in the mission? Is the, et cetera. And there are really good plans, formal plans for accomplishing the excellent ones that you don't see a lot of in funeral service, but other professions have embraced, and they're doing extremely well. So it's not that it's easy to do a turnaround in funeral service, but when you think about, it's bad people, no, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a part of the passive aggressive culture that I see quite a bit. A funeral homeowner or manager will tell me, I just get so frustrated because when we get busy, everybody's standing around waiting for me to tell them what to do.
Yes.
And I'll say, well, you trained them that way.
Yes.
And then they'll say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, the way you operate, and I know I'm making generalization, but this is very, very common. The way you operate is everybody's got a clear understanding about what you don't like, but they don't have any idea what you do like.
Yeah.
So they have determined in their unconscious mind that it's better to wait for you to tell them what to do
rather than take the initiative themselves and risk you having,
because they could get yelled at.
Yes.
So this is part of the passive aggressive culture. When you have a high performing culture, everybody's working towards a common mission.
Teams.
They understand
teams,
how they work together.
Support one another.
They support each other. And when you use the word true team, if in a true team, if somebody is out of sync with the team will take care of it.
The team will do it, yeah.
They'll either fix it or they'll get rid of them.
I agree. I really feel that.
Yeah. So those are some of the things.
We can talk about.
We could talk forever
more about that. Yeah.
That's a very complicated.
And I think for this
coming
interview,
back, just if I can summarize this.
Yes, sir.
The thing that's important in managing a business is not being technically competent in every part of the business. You can't be a superior marketer and a superior finance person and a superior funeral director and so on, or superior hearse driver.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be all that.
Right.
Nobody can. I'm sorry. I know you think otherwise, but
no, I'm with you.
That's kind of how it is.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have to have common goals, and you do have to simplify it. People are simple animals. They actually react negatively to complicated situations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I give you the 5. Yes. If I'm talking to Ray Aikens, the financial analyst, we could go on forever.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We could talk about the IRR word.
Yeah,
total rate of return.
But nobody's really that
nobody
interested.
cares.
Yeah, nobody cares.
But if I tell them, you know what? You need to be monitoring your volume, your average sale, your cost of sales, your labor, and your facility, and here's how you do it. And you need to keep a tab on your EBITDA. Oh, and by the way, your volume,
internal rate of return.
Sales,
but nobody's really
sales,
that interested.
Labor,
Yeah, nobody
and your
cares.
facility, and here's how you do it. And you need to keep it.
Is that the end of your summary?
That's my soliloquy. That's my.
Okay.
I've come down from the mountain with the tablets. Here.
Okay, I'm thinking. I'm torn because there's more about your background that's worthy of coming out, but then we can actually get into the gist of how you can serve, how you can help, and I'm afraid that may be a lengthy conversation. Maybe I'll come back to you.
What I would say to you on that, Ray, you and I and people like us who are analytically predisposed,
mm-hmm.
we love to get into the granular.
Right.
Okay? But what you're going to find is the overwhelming majority of the population, they're not just talking about funeral directors, finds that to be annoying.
All right.
And so simplicity, we're not trying to turn you into a Warren Buffett or one of those guys.
Right.
We're trying to help you become a good business manager within your own personal needs. So, for instance, one of my heroes is John Horan, who's built a huge enterprise and recently sold
Funeral director?
Yeah, in Denver, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Horan and McConaughey. I think he hung the moon, personally. Okay? But that's John. That's not you. That's not me. There's a lot of people out there who are just really, really happy taking care of 150 or 175 families a year.
Yeah.
And you know what? They make a very good living doing it.
I'm sure you can with that kind of volume.
So
even with cremation involved, you can pay the bills.
You have to fit the assignment. I can't impose my ambitions on somebody else. I have to figure out what their ambitions are.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to fit with it. I have to fit a recommendation within that.
Let me take you through the portion that I intended to read a lot earlier. And I'll tell you why I want to take that approach. Alan, I've known you for a long time, and I think you're very good at what you do.
Thank you.
We have an audience of professionals out here that are in various stages of their career.
Right.
Some at the beginning, some at the middle, and some at the end. And the prime directive from a management standpoint, I've always felt that anyone who owns and operates a business, the prime directive is growth, so that at the end, when your exit strategy comes into play, all the years of work, everything you've built up, that becomes your nest egg in retirement. So a good manager must hold first off in their mind, growth. I want growth. And with the growth, I'm having a blank spot of it because I want growth. And what do I want? What else do I want with that? I want growth, and I want to exit the business with a comfortable retirement.
Right.
Why spend 40 years and retire a pauper? You can't sell your business, or it's called, you've missed the boat.
Well, Ray, this is a good example. That's you. So here's what I've had to come to terms with, because I had, I superimposed my ambitions on people when I was younger all the time.
Okay.
And it really confused me when I got some of the responses I got, which were not healthy for me or for them. And so here's what everybody, I think we underestimate funeral directors. I think funeral directors, a lot of people who analyze funeral directors, they want them to be what Wall Street would imagine, or what some aggressive company builder would. And in this country, I think we overuse the word entrepreneur. And we think the entrepreneur is a business owner. All right. Well, there is an entrepreneur, and there's a wonderful book. I recommend it all the time, and I'm going to forget the name, but The E-Myth.
I have that book.
The E-Myth.
He wrote a follow-up to it.
He wrote several follow-ups.
Yeah.
But here's the point. And I'm going to use myself as an example. Okay? Some people are excellent technicians.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Or they enjoy the technical side of a given business.
Yes.
Some people are entrepreneurs in the correct sense of the word, which is they are builders. All right. And it doesn't, to a true entrepreneur, it doesn't really matter what kind of business they have, as long as it meets certain parameters. But they want to build, they want to grow, they want to do this, they want to do that. So what we have in the mainstream, and this is, I think, where people underestimate funeral directors, is that a funeral director, as a human being, as a person, a funeral home owner, gets to a point where they're pretty comfortable. And we go, oh, well, that makes them a bad person. No, it doesn't. I have seen this in multiple industries. And in fact, if you were to look at the property and casualty insurance agency business, all right?
Okay.
A property casualty agent will reach my wife's uncle used to be senior vice president of State Farm, and a property casualty agency will reach a point. Now the point is different depending on the agent, but they have enough clients, and it doesn't matter how much incentive or goading you apply. The only solution to the company itself is to open another agency, because that guy has reached where he wants to be, and there's not a thing wrong with it. Okay, so I said earlier, a guy doing 150 or 175 calls he can make a pretty darn good living.
I agree.
Okay, I agree. Not in South Florida, but in the most of this country, still they can make a pretty good living in the realm of things.
Okay.
All right. I think a lot of people have looked at me, or maybe you have done this over my career, thinking I'm an entrepreneur. I have come to terms with the fact that I like being a technician.
Mm-hmm.
That's my comfort zone. That's where I like to be.
Well,
So it's okay. What I tell clients is what's not okay is to not run your business in a way that it is performing. It's like not. This is a poor metaphor, but it's like driving a car that's never been serviced, and you got 300,000 miles on it. You still got the oil you bought in it.
right.
Okay. It's not fair to your family. It's not fair to your employees, and it's really not fair to the community.
Okay.
So there's a difference between laziness and being happy where you are.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I get passionate about this. There's a difference between laziness and being happy where you are.
To your employees, and it's really not fair to the community.
I'm sorry, I get passionate about this.
So,
That's fine.
there's a difference between laziness
we don't have a lot of
and being happy where you are.
what remains. And this is where I really hope our listening audience, our viewers will pay some attention. And I'm going to go back to a statement you made. I ran across years ago, and when I read that statement, it so resonated with me. I immediately became a subscriber to your weekly newsletter, and it wasn't too long after that I contacted you to ask you to do an interview for us, participate in an interview on Funeral Radio. So what was it? This goes back to when you and Carl Jennings were kind of fooling around with the 2020 project.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, 2020 is a year away, and that's why I think this is such a good place to start. How far did that go back to when the
6 years ago?
6
or 7 years ago.
Okay, but what you were looking at, you saying funeral industry on the whole was on a path toward declining profitability.
It is.
A path that had become so entrenched that 5 or 6 years ago, you were projecting at the rate in which profitability was subpar, that come 2020, there's just not going to be that many people. The population is going to continue. Population of providers is going to continue to decline. And I think if it wasn't you, it was David Nixon. It was Nixon who said this, and I don't know if you're familiar with this quote. Over the last decade, over the past 10 years, revenue or profitability, I forget which one, but they're tied to one another,
Right,
of
course.
It has averaged 0.5% growth per year for all points. That's like stagnant to a declining trend. And this is what, when you hosted your thing on exit strategies today, that's almost the worst thing. That's a nightmare for a funeral director who's at the end of his life curve. You follow me? And is looking for an exit strategy. If you've been going for 10 years with flat to no growth, rising expenses, people switching from traditional calls to cremation, your valuation has got to be negatively impacted. And here you are, because if it's not you, it's David Nixon who made this other statement that said over the next decade, what percentage of turnover? Almost 2 out of 3 business owners are going to be. That's all, not just funeral service, all small business. Next decade.
That comes from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
That transition, but that's an age track, okay?
Well, if it's an age track, the thing is, it's a track where I got my nest egg and I was counting on living off the proceeds from the transition or transfer of my business to new ownership.
Well, Ray,
and if I don't realize what I've thought would be getting. Then
I said today that one of the things that drives me is that I observe
mm-hmm.
and have observed for 40 years a collection of people who have poured their hearts out, poured themselves out for others in their community, sacrificed their family in many respects, taken on a lot more responsibility than any employee would.
Okay.
All right. And at the end of their career, they don't have a lot to show for it. And I think that's wrong. And I challenge people, challenge your listeners, we need to start believing we deserve better. Not do better, we deserve better. Okay?
Well, because it's achievable. It's something
it's
you think
eminently achievable.
Yeah.
It's eminently achievable.
And it must rile you to have or encounter people who are in denial or who want to defend some old paradigm.
Well, I'm going to shock you, but things have changed so much in the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
This influence is not as strong as it once was. But I was talking with a senior executive at a major casket company. I'll leave it unnamed, but there aren't many of them.
Right.
Who once told me, he said, Alan, we've realized that most funeral directors have figured out how much they can lose before it changes their lifestyle. Now, I really
how much you
was
can
offended
lose
by
before
that.
You change.
I was offended by that, but I have to tell you, it's true. Okay, so let's start over here with this conversation, that the 2020 project.
Yes.
And implicit in that comment and in that projection was the assumption that nothing would change.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That they would continue to operate as they had historically operated over the last, I think I was using 10 or 20 years. I don't
mm-hmm.
remember. All right. I do, for many times when I do an assessment evaluation, I will do that very same thing because it produces a chart I use.
Okay.
And I would say that 9 out of 10 times, if you look at just the plain history, you don't embellish or deduct or whatever from the history, the chart will show declining profitability over the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But again, implicit in that chart is that they do nothing.
Not
so
proactive.
It's really a cost of doing nothing chart.
Okay.
All right.
The cost of doing nothing.
But people do adapt.
Yeah.
So you have to remember that they do adapt. Now.
But are they proactive or are they in response to
a
a dire
adapt.
situation?
It's a reactive adaptation.
Okay.
They are not fulfilling their potential. They are underperforming and continue to underperform.
Okay.
All right.
Do they know that? Do they know that, or are they in denial about that aspect?
I don't think it's that they're in denial. I really don't. I think it's a mistake to underestimate the intelligence of the funeral directors.
Okay.
Okay. But I think that they have reached that stasis point in life that most human beings reach, where they are happy. They're content. I could do 10 more calls, but what would that do to my lifestyle?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do 10 more calls. I got all the money I need. And I'm sorry, I know that sounds that I'm talking down. It is not.
Yeah.
I have people I work with occasionally, and they'll say, I was really worried that you were going to criticize me. What am I going to criticize? You've had a successful career, a successful business.
Mm-hmm.
Could you be doing better? Absolutely, you could be doing better.
Mm-hmm.
But, you're not bankrupt. You got good staff, et cetera, et cetera. So be careful about using any judgment on this, because
applying the same standard broad across the industry.
You might be more ambitious than other people. This is a clear point. Now, what I do object to, what makes me mad, is that the industry, and in this point I'm going to call it an industry, not a profession, because this is the way an industry behaves, is systematically, without realizing it, underserving the public.
Okay.
Now, if they were to serve the public the way the public needs to be served, and I know that's my opinion, it would have a very salutary effect on their revenue and on their profitability, on their personal income.
It would
Okay.
show. It would be reflected.
It would
throughout the
absolutely be
business.
reflected. But here's what I mean by that. Now, they've gotten better about not just keeling over when somebody says cremation and saying, I want direct cremation. But they are by no means doing what they could be doing. And it is not about the money. It is about helping people pay tribute to their loved ones in a way that's appropriate for them.
Now the psychology part is really coming out on you, because everyone I know in the psychology area, that's what they say, that the people are really looking for healing. They're looking for a solution to a situation that's causing a lot of stress. And
I have to say, I'm not sure they know what they're looking for.
Well,
I think the most they're looking for is someone they think won't cheat them or manipulate them or is safe. I think that's the most. But then you move on to the fact that they don't know what they want or what they need.
they haven't articulated.
Well, they don't have a clue. So the easiest way out is to do nothing, is to say, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to say, cremate me and, good luck. But, the reality, my mother was cremated. My father was cremated. The idea, even before my family was involved I was involved in funeral service, the idea that we would do nothing, that we would just cremate and dispose of them, is repugnant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people do feel that way, but they don't want to talk about it. They don't know who to talk to. And so here's what I'm seeing, Ray. I'm seeing selective people in the profession experimenting, independent of each other, with an approach in the arrangements conference and producing significantly better results, getting an average sale on cremation that is very close to the burial margin, not the burial revenue, but the burial margin.
I understand.
And what they report consistently, the few people who are doing this, is that their volume is going up. They're growing. And they think the reason that they are growing is that because of the approach they've taken in the arrangements conference, people feel that they have been saved from making a poor choice. All right? So what they're doing, there's two elements.
The funeral director helped me.
Well, the funeral director helped me. So there's two elements. They're not aggressive in the arrangement conference. They're assertive. They require that people understand what all their options are. But instead of selling or order taking, they put their, I call it they put their teacher's hat on.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, and you've heard me talk about this before, I had a funeral director many years ago, back in the 90s, explain to me why an hour's visitation prior to a service won't work.
Won't
work. And when my mother died, logistically, I won't go into it because we're running out of time, but that's what we had to do for my mother. But because I knew what he had said, it helped us in two ways. Number one, everything he predicted happened. We stood there for a full 30 minutes thinking no one was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, everybody came. So then the service started. But the second way it helped me was because I knew that, I arranged for a 2-hour reception following at the funeral home.
Okay. And
we had all our needs met, all the needs of our guests, and our guests were able to get home to New York City and Boston, before nightfall.
Mm-hmm.
So that piece of advice, another piece of advice.
But even in the case of a cremation, you're saying the visitation.
We had the visitation an hour before.
The social or the repast that took place afterwards,
right,
made the whole overall experience, you felt satisfied.
It was a rich experience.
You felt lifted.
Yeah. Well, that's another point, but we won't do that on this one. But yes.
Okay.
We were able to.
It went right.
No, here's the word
satisfied.
I would use connection.
Okay.
We would not have been able to connect with the people that attended, and there were over 50 for a 92-year-old woman that came from New York City and Boston, and we would not have been able to connect. And we would not known how to put it into words, but I think we would have felt disappointed. We probably would have hung around the lawn on the funeral home forever, and people would have, what are you doing? Because in that little town, there was no place to go to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So my point is, what I don't know. Probably would have hung around the lawn on the funeral home forever, and what these people are telling me is that their customers are significantly happier, but that they are driving more volume for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm talking about underserving versus overserving and serving correctly.
I imagine that increases the likelihood of referrals really driving.
That's,
the
I
growth.
think, what's happening. Or people are actually experiencing that in the process.
They tell others
Yeah.
about the time they had. If there was a loss, they're going to recommend a funeral home where those kind of experiences tend to take
You
place.
are a guide.
You want to, yeah.
You're a guide.
Okay.
Okay, here's one final example, all right? My sister wanted everybody to have the opportunity to take a moment to say something about my mother. I said, we're not doing that. We are not doing that.
Those would be remarks, and they would have lasted all night.
And here's what the minister said. He said, boy, I'm glad you said that. He said to my sister, he said, first of all, they won't talk about your mother. They'll talk about themselves.
Yeah.
Secondly, if one of them loses control, everybody will be praying that this whole thing would just be over. It will be a travesty.
I agree. I agree.
But see, as the funeral director, you need to tell me that.
Okay.
And by the way, here's a solution. Instead of just extemporaneously standing up and saying something about mom, we're going to give everybody a 3x5 card and let them write something out, and then they'll have something to read. And if somebody breaks down, the funeral director can step in and read it for them. Simple solution.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, you got me on a tear, and I didn't.
I know, and this is what happens when you and I get together, because we do a lot of all over the board.
You break this up into 3 or 4 parts.
Okay, so I'm going to. How long have we been going? We don't.
It's almost 7 o'clock. Your poor wife is down there starving.
Here's.
I think Tyler went out for dinner.
Here's what I'd like to do, because I'm going to go back to your original theme. The prime directive is growth. You want to,
if you want
to grow a business,
to optimize
you can
your
reach
business.
a level or a plateau where you're comfortable and stay there, but I'm still not sure if I would really want to make that kind of a choice myself.
Remember that as you get to certain plateaus,
yeah,
the internal operating dynamics of a firm changes. All right.
Yes. Okay.
And you, as the founder, may not be ready for that
kind
next
of
plateau.
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
So yes, growth is an imperative, especially now that we have declining averages.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth of the matter is also, people who own a business have the right to declare where they want to stop off.
Yeah.
And they pay the price.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've taken the position that, you know what, if you're happy at 175 calls, that's great. But let me optimize the value. Let me show you things that will not be offensive to you or your staff, that will help you optimize the value within your abilities.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and that's really the best you can do with most people. And I'm not being cynical. It is about people.
One concern that I've had, that I've noticed during the course of my career, and you got to understand, in my situation, things worked out pretty good, but my dad begged me to become a funeral director, and I thought he was absolutely out of his mind. I said, "It's just no way I'm going to do it." I went off to college and got a degree in business, and went to graduate school, and started working for an investment bank. And all the while, Dad was begging me to consider funeral service. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, but
Right.
I thought he worked too hard. and he didn't seem to be making anything commensurate to what I could be making for roughly what corresponded to a 40-hour week. I could still make more money than he was doing, making more. That's not the story I wanted to tell. I drifted off again because I'm sitting here talking with you. But I finished school with a background in business and finance. None of that I would ever think would apply to funeral service. Yet, I came into funeral service, and more with every passing year, I began to see the same problems driving the industry dynamics that apply in the world.
It's a form of benign neglect.
Yeah. But here's the point I wanted to make, and this is what most concerns me. I saw the transition from the classic old system of operating a business where if you wanted to make improvements to your leasehold or your structure, you go to the bank and take out a loan secured by what you owed on the building, secured by the real estate. We fast forward till today, and somewhere along the line, a line was crossed, and the kind of improvements you need to make to your business today don't have nothing to do with painting the interior.
That's right. That's exactly right.
It don't have anything to do with you walking into your local bank and they say, hey, what do you need? You need a little loan? And okay, come over here. We'll write up the pay. Now you need to maybe expand the facility, tear down some things, build up something else. You want parking spaces. You want bright colors. You want a dining room and what have you. That, my friend, to facilitate that kind of growth, that means you need to go to the bank, and you can't walk into the bank and just say, I need to borrow $300,000, $400,000, $500,000.
Well, you just talked, Ray, about the physical changes, but there are some intrinsic changes, some deep intrinsic changes.
Yes. How
the profession interacts with the public, how you develop your staff. All right, in your own personal image, sometimes, how you see funeral service relative to the public and what the changing, radically changing consumer needs, which, by the way, I don't believe are all bad for the profession, but that's another story for another time. All right, I'm sorry, I know this probably isn't the answer you were looking for.
No, I don't care. I just want an answer that's going to be closer to truth or help me understand.
I'm going to go back to the disclaimer that it is never going to be my intent to try and turn funeral directors into accountants. But it is my intent to help them have the same, not same, but have a higher level of financial support than they are getting today. So literally, I go in and work with local accountants. I teach them what they should be monitoring and how they should be helping their clients. I meet with them and I say, I want you meeting with your client 3 times a year. Here's what you talk about in the first quarter. Here's what you talk about in the second quarter. Here's what you talk about in the third quarter. And by the way, if you call on November 30th and tell my client that they've got a big tax bill coming, you're fired. That should never be a conversation that happens November 30th. It should happen June 30th. So, they need that financial support. That's just part of it, Ray. What is missing, and this is, I'm almost hesitant to tell you this, but as a finance person, you will understand this statement. The overwhelming majority of people in funeral service have no idea how money works. Okay? So here's an example. My wife's family are farmers. All right? Why would a farmer sell grain futures? What is he anticipating is going to happen for him to sell?
He's insuring his crop against disaster. He's locking in a price.
He's locking in a price because he believes.
I tell you what I think he believes.
Okay.
That if something did go wrong, it would wipe him out.
Well, that's part of the thinking, but he sells his futures because he believes there's a better likelihood that the prices would go down.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And that
okay.
he's selling it at a better rate. Okay. Well, that is pre-need in a nutshell. You have declining averages. This is how money works. You have declining averages. You have a declining mix of sales, rapidly declining mix of sales.
Yes.
If you had sold pre-need 15, 20 years ago for people you are serving today, you'd still be delivering copper caskets. So that's how we need to understand, and I don't think the average funeral director needs to understand it. I think his advisors need to understand it. Money works different than what people think. If I go out and build a $100 million factory, I expect that factory to be standing for 150 years after I die.
Mm-hmm.
To Wall Street, if they get a better price in China, they'll close it.
Yeah.
Well, that was last
Shut
year.
it down and
Okay.
move on.
So money rolls downhill is something I like to say. So, to your point, what are the, I took the position today that I wouldn't build anything larger than 5,000 square feet. I just wouldn't do it. But my reasoning, I don't think people understood what I was talking about. I wasn't talking about so much the cost relative to what is affordable. I was talking about using my capital wisely.
Mm-hmm.
I got to spend nickels twice.
Yeah.
And nobody really understands that point of view. And it's not that I'm so smart, but that's part of what you have to do in the turnaround business. You got to control pennies.
Mm-hmm.
You got to understand that, there's an apocryphal story about Lee Iacocca. The first day on the job at Chrysler, he went down and talked to the chief financial officer. And he said, how many days cash do we have? And the answer was 3. We have 3 days of cash. And so his response to the CFO was, well, where should we spend it? And that's really a story that relates to people like me, in that what he was saying is, where's our best return on investment? Where can we apply the little capital resources that we have
left
to get the best return so that we can make it 4 days?
Okay.
So, and I'm really now, I shouldn't have even gone there, but
I'm having the same feeling too, Alan, because we both have a deep appreciation and love for the industry.
yeah.
And we bring perspectives. Some we seem to be in unison on, and some, as we've talked today, I've heard I've seen it from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something.
But my angle, remember that.
But I'm like your funeral family. I don't know until I come in. I'm looking to hear what other options are because I want to evaluate them. I think you and I may have started something with this program today because, frankly, I wanted to be quick. I wanted to hit the high points.
Yeah, we have talked way too long.
And talk about all the advantages.
And we may want to do this on Zoom.
Yeah, Tyler may have to chop it up. He may have to chop it up. I'm going to say this. We may start, you and I, a regular discussion. It's
Ray,
up to
what
you.
I would recommend you do.
If you want to do it once a quarter.
No, here's what I would recommend you
Go
do.
ahead.
I would recommend you take today's shooting, all right,
Mm-hmm.
and you dice it up.
Sure.
And there's going to be pieces that we need to go over again
Mm-hmm.
and shorten up.
Yeah.
And make tighter. I mean, we were basically ad-libbing. You weren't, but I was.
Well, I had my notes here, but once I start,
You don't. We takes it in a direction.
Yeah.
But I think, and this may be ego, but I think people, it's some of the things we discussed as bites that maybe go 8 or 10 minutes, which is way too long,
Mm-hmm.
I think would be of interest to some people.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We elaborated in some cases that may have made the point clearer, but it chewed up so much time. We
It
kind of
does.
like
And I think that
sidetrack.
Tyler, as the producer, really needs to come back if you want to do that, and I'm more than happy to do it.
Yeah.
Let me show the two of you something I'm experimenting with.
Okay. I think that's a good idea, and then we can confine ourselves to one subject at a time and
Well,
and
I don't
talk it
mean
over.
to do this on Pick My Brain, because I'm going to be soliciting questions from funeral directors. I don't care what the question is. I'll try to
Okay.
answer it. But I got to challenge myself, which is not easy, to answer it in 3 minutes or less.
I got you.
So the same thing here. If you want to go ahead and take key points, all right. I know in advance what the key point's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know in advance what the key point's going to be. If my response creates a trail you want to go down, that gets to be a different video.
Mm-hmm.
Alan, last time we talked, you said such and such.
Right.
I want to drill down on that.
Right.
And we do the same thing, but
Alan, like so many times in the past, you start out, and before you know it, the hours gone by, and we've touched on so many different points. I'm afraid I don't want to leave our listeners, scattered all over the place trying to figure it out. I wish we could have been more focused, but this is what it's been great. The suggestion, I think I'm going to just close.
thank you.
Alan, it's been great. Scratching the surface. I want to do more. I want to thank you so much again for it. Adds another aspect that some of the things I may not have thoroughly covered, and then of course I'd like to challenge you on a couple issues.
Well,
and
we
and
need to
let's
think.
toss
Tyler
those-
needs to think about how he wants to do that. But Ray, let's do this. If we do this,
Yeah.
let's make a commitment to each other that we leave our listeners every time at the end. The closing comment is the takeaway.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So today, if I were in your place, I said, if I boil this all down to one takeaway, it would be that we have two key drivers. It would be to keep it simple. We have two key drivers, volume and average sales. Three costs, cost of sales, labor, and facility, and one result, EBITDA.
Alan, we've been at this for a while. We've got to wrap up. And I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning with what you started out at. And you mentioned, I think it was six things. 6 things that we ought to be concerned about. There's 2 key drivers
Right.
of what, profitability?
They're just drivers. Think of them as drivers.
Think of of growth.
Yeah.
Of drivers of growth. And that's volume and what else?
Average sale.
Volume and average sale. Average revenue per call?
Yes. Average revenue per call.
Okay.
Excluding cash advances.
Okay. 2 key drivers. Volume.
3 cost centers. 3 costs.
Average revenue per sale.
Yeah.
Second thing is 3 costs.
These 3 costs you need to control.
I know one is labor.
Yep.
Facilities.
Yep.
And cost of sales.
Correct.
And cost of sales to include merchandise only. Don't
Correct.
throw other
stuff in there.
things up there. Those will give us one result.
There's one result you need to tune
One
into.
key result.
That-
And that's EBITDA.
Right. Not profits.
Not profits. So
EBITDA.
EBITDA, once again, for our listeners, is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization.
Yes.
We'll talk about these things in the future.
Yep.
And we'll devote time to it piece by piece.
Yep.
We leave our listeners today with this to think about, to maybe do some research. Shoot me some questions, and I can bounce them off
Sure.
you in a later show. 2 key drivers, volume and average revenue per call. 3 costs, cost of sales, labor, and our facilities management.
Right.
1 result. It's not profit. It is EBITDA.
Right.
And I know people have been hearing that word for years and no one really thoroughly understands
Well,
what that
let's
means.
do an episode on it. It's not hard to explain.
That'll be great. That'll be great. We're going to sign out for now, guys. Thanks for listening. I promise you, we've got some ideas that resulted from this interview today that we're going to take and come back to you with some things I think that can really improve your management understanding. And thank you, Alan.
You are welcome.
Very much appreciated.